Hello, I'm Dr. Andrew Sargent. Welcome to my course, 101 Most Misunderstood Verses. We're coming to you today from Sacred Fire Church in Bellevue, Florida. Come on by. Welcome to 101 Most Misunderstood Verses. We are continuing today with our conversation on reading Genesis like a pagan. So we get the idea of kingdom establishment and the role of chaos and chaos conf in the midst of it. This is what we're looking at in the book of Genesis. An enemy is defeated. Now let's talk a little bit about Helderkampf, because it's going to become a thing. So in Helderkampf, which is the first piece, which there's an enemy that's threatening the order of the world. And the champion of God, or the champion, it was sometimes God himself, conquers and comes into battle with that enemy force. And so what usually happens is four parts to this. They come against each other. They exchange taunts and threats. You know, your mama wears army boots. Yeah, well, she stole them from your mother. All right, whatever. I'm going to cut your head off and feed your body to the birds of the air. David says what? You come to me with sword and spear, and I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. You're done, man. And then the battle commences. And now what happens is the champion defeats his foe without killing him. That's an important step. He doesn't kill him. He conquers him. And when he conquers him in such a way that he forces him into a position in which he offers verbal or physical manifestations of the superiority of the champion. So David puts Goliath on his face, prostrate. Joshua takes the 5 kings that are hiding in the cave and drags them out and puts them on their faces before the elders of Israel and makes the elders of Israel put their feet on their necks to make pronouncements of judgments over them. You're going to see this kind of stuff. So you even see this paradigm when the guy comes against Jezebel. And Jezebel dolls herself up. Some people think that she was dolling herself up to seduce him. I don't believe that. I think she was dolling herself up because she knew she was about to die. And she comes and she looks out the window and she curses him, and he curses her back. And he cries out, "Who's on the side of the Lord?" And they throw her out the window. And she hits the ground. And then he rides. Now she hits the ground. She's now flat. He rides his horse over her. Ouch. Taking a woman who is probably not dead yet, and rides his horse over her. Yeah. Then he goes inside and eats his lunch, and the dogs come and devour her. So this is the this extra stage. All right, so first thing, you taunts and threats, defeat without death, but with humiliation, then death, separate from the defeat, and then desecration of the corpse. So David taunts and threats with Goliath, throws the stone, hits him in the leg. It doesn't, even if he hits him in the head. I believe it hit him in the leg, but even if he hits him in the head, he brings him on his face, prostrates him, rushes on him, takes his sword out, kills him. Having killed him, he cuts his head off. He takes his head and he takes it to Jerusalem, and he's riding around with it. He's already chosen his capital, and it's a very wise move. He's picked a piece of ground that no tribe can lay claim to. No tribe can say, "We own the king," because he's in our territory. Like the Benjamites might say of Saul of Gibeah, "We're a special tribe because the king's in our land." No, David chooses a territory that nobody has, but he's manifesting it. They take his armor and they put his sword into the house of God. Now it says, and he put it into his tent, right? But where would we find it next? We find it in the temple. So when it says his tent, it doesn't mean David's tent. It means which is where it's supposed to go. We're confused on that because we don't know the rules. They know the rules. All right, so Saul gets killed. Well, Saul gets wounded, and he's going to die, and he asks this guy to kill him. Guy claims to kill him. He doesn't, but he thinks he's going to get honor if he does. What Saul actually does is kill himself. But when the pagans find his body, they cut off his head and hands, they take his armor and put it in the house of their god, tack his body to the wall of their city, and take his head and hands on poles and march them around celebrating their victory. This is the desecration. All right, so this thing shows up. Now, why this is going to be important is because we're going to do a lesson on Genesis 8 in which I believe that this paradigm is existing in imagery in Genesis 8. The defeat of the flood follows the Helderkampf paradigm, which is why it's in my doctoral dissertation, because I'm doing a dissertation on the flood, and then Helderkampf shows up in it for this particular reason. So the enemy is defeated, the enemy's territory is subsumed, authority is established through covenant, often divine banquets. Rest is achieved, and the kingdom buildup begins. This is Genesis. This is David. Remember, when David had rest from all his enemies round about, what did he do? He did two things. When David had rest from all his enemies round about, he built a palace, and he sought to build a temple. That's what you do from a position of rest. You turn your attention to the building up of the territory, the building up of the land. Rest is that place in which those first three stages are done. And now the real job of kingdom growth, kingdom development can take place. So kingdom establishment pattern. This is so many places in the scripture, and in all the myths of pagans, by the way. All right, so the origins of chaos plays a primary role in every given people's understanding of reality and particular processes for fighting chaos. We've talked about that, okay? So most ancient Near Eastern people saw the source of chaos, anti-life, destabilizing, debilitating forces, as a fundamental element of the world. The whole world was founded on this. Now we see the stories of Enuma Elish and the Baal epic, okay? I don't know if I want to take a lot of time with that right now, but it's worth doing. These are two creation stories. They also emphasize what I'm saying about creation, whereas the Enuma Elish approaches creation as if it's the origin of the world. It's not exactly, but that's the way people usually interpret it. But the Baal epic is that creation takes place when Baal changes the structure of the world. So anytime the structures of the world are radically changed, you have a new creation. So you're going to have a new creation in the sending of the flood, and you're going to have a new creation at Babel when God fundamentally changes the structures of man's relationship in languages, and you're going to have the beginning of a creation in the covenant made with Abraham, whose children are going to become Israel, and Israel is going to be planted as a nation in the world. And to plant them as a nation in the world is an act of creation. So it's going to talk about the creation of Israel. The world changes because Israel is in it. The world before Israel is different than the world after Israel, and Israel's presence in the world changes the nature of things. That which seemed like endless darkness, just like the darkness of Tohu Vabohu, and God said, "Let there be light," he looked at the pagan world and said, "Let there be Israel. Let there be Torah." And light came. And then, "Let my son bring his church." So Jesus, just like Israel came and Torah came with it, Moses comes, Israel comes, Torah comes, with Jesus comes, his church comes. The world is a different place. It's not surprising that they recoded time to count a new beginning from the coming of Jesus. And all the Gospels use the language of new creation in their introductions. All of them. Because the coming of Jesus is a creation, a new creation of the world, because the world is radically different after these things have happened than before they've happened. The structure of the world, the hope of the world, everything in the world is different. So after the flood, what does he give? He comes to the flood, and he says, "I will no longer flood the earth because of man." Right. But man's heart is still a mess. Matter of fact, he says the same words of the heart of man after the flood that he said about the hearts of man that led to the flood. So that reality has not changed. And so what does he do? He gives them one law. Now, he actually gives them law, capital L, because he gives them the concept of man holding each other accountable. Now, we can say that in the creation of the world where he gives them the command, don't eat from that tree, that's commandment. But law is when men are held accountable by God to hold each other accountable to their behavior. So he sows in the new family law. And that first law, is the seed of all just law, because in it is the concept of natural rights and the nature of what you must do and not do when dealing with a fellow human being. He who sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for man was made in the image of God. That is the establishment of all justice in the earth. And when that goes, all justice goes. That's why people who reject the existence of God, have a humanist hope for the world, do not hesitate to say with Mao, who cares about nuclear war? So we kill a few billion people. Maybe we kill 4 billion people, and I've got 900 million left. There were a lot fewer people on the earth back then. I can do something good with that. And what is the murder? What is the death of billions? Tain't nothing but a thing. Sweep them away because they are nothing. To hold to this understanding that man was made in the image of God, and God demands that he be treated with all the respect due that position. That is the whole of natural rights. You have no right to kill him. You have no right to enslave him. You have no right to destroy that which his hands have made. You have no right to take from him. Property rights are here in the very beginning. Thou shalt not steal. That's the establishment of property rights. And those Christians who are trying to hang on to some Marxist vision in which we need to eradicate the concept of property are standing against Scripture from its very core. Man is the image of God who puts his hand to create, and to have that stolen from him, taken away from him, is a fundamental violation of who he is. So God changes the world. The world after Noah is not the same as the world before Noah. It has light. So you see that you got the figure, and then you got the light that comes with it. Tohu vabohu, the Spirit of God, let there be light. And then you've got the flood, and you've got Noah, and he gives them light, law. This is, every man will hold every other man accountable to this. He who sheds the blood of man, you're going to shed their blood, because God was made in the image of God. And then he gives them Israel, or you can say Moses and Israel, who is the instrument of creation of Israel, and the law. And then comes Christ with his church, which is the spread of the word of Christ and the purposes of God and the Torah throughout the world. I know it seems like I'm saying it again and again, but it's really, really important to get our heads around it. So in Enuma Elish, here's the big skinny on Enuma Elish. You have darkness forever, the water, eternal darkness, silence, and you have two waters, always male and female, the Apsu and the Tiamat. And the Apsu are the fresh waters, and Tiamat are the salt waters, and they are in mythic time forever mingling and commingling. And out of the commingling of their waters, gods are created, and you end up with Ea, who is the god of earth, and so earth forms. And then you've got this god and that god, and the god of this, and the god, and you get all that, right? But the gods, and then the gods have gods, and they're loud and they're noisy, and they begin to disrupt. And so Ra comes and brings his light into their darkness, and they're like, oh gosh, shut the blinds, right? And they can't stand it. And then when Marduk is born, oh, Marduk, what a pain in the neck. But before Marduk is born, the Apsu, who's so tired of all this nonsense, talks with Tiamat and says, we got to do something about these kids. I'm going to kill them all. I'm going to kill them all. And she's like, oh, they're just children. Leave them alone. And so he tries to kill them all. But Ea, here's what's going to happen. And Ea comes and he speaks the magic words over Apsu and puts him to sleep. You see what's happening here?
Yes.
The defeat without death and humiliation. So he speaks the word over him, and that word puts him to sleep and conquers him. And then he kills him, and he traps him underneath his earthworks, springs, and the waters flowing up through the earth, and begins to use the waters of the Apsu to water the earth to bring vegetation growth. But Tiamat has lost her eternal, ever-churning love. And she's mad about it, but doesn't do anything for a while. And then Marduk is born, and Marduk is the storm god, lightning and thunder and rock. He's like a teenager on a Harley with loud pipes. You know, he's got his little horn, and it's howling wolf. You know, and he's riding up and down the stratosphere, making all kinds of noise. And Tiamat says, "Oh, Apsu was right. These guys got to go." So she spontaneously creates within herself great monsters. One of these great monsters is Leviathan, the dragon with 7 heads. And she creates armies, and she takes Kingu, who's going to be one of her general, and he's going to go to war. And then Ea, who thinks, well, I took care of Apsu, I'll take care of her. She is so terrifying that Ea cowers in fear, and he goes back, and they have a council of the gods. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And one of them's got the Tablet of Destinies. The Tablet of Destinies is the source of power for the chief god, the one who, because he has it, can declare reality, create things to be or to not be. They don't have that power in themselves. There's some other thing up there that they're wrestling with, right? And so they don't know what to do, and everyone's too afraid to fight it. And Marduk, because he's young and stupid, he comes in and goes, fight her. She ain't nothing. I'll take care of her. But if I do, I want the Tablet of Destinies, and I want to be ruler and reigner over all. And they're like, okay, just go take care of her. So he comes against her. And there's blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And then he sends his winds. And his winds become a net. And he wraps her up and he immobilizes her so that she cannot move. Immobilization. Interesting. Yeah, this is a recurring theme, the immobilization of the waters, the calming of the waters. That's going to become important when we get to Genesis 8. All right. So much so that one scholar once said, the surprising thing about the flood story is that there's no calming of the waters. There's no immobilization of the waters, which occurs in almost every other flood story and every other creation story. And I'm reading this text going, it's right there. That's what that means, dude. Anyway, so that's my whole doctoral dissertation. That's right there, dude. That's it. 333 pages in. It's right there, dude. All right, so he goes and he wraps her up with his winds. And then he takes one final wind and she opens her mouth and he rams the wind down her gullet and blows her up like a blowfish. And then he takes his sword and he splits her up the middle, cuts her into two pieces, and he takes half of her body and he makes the sky. And he takes the other half of her body and he makes the more of the earth. And he causes the two great rivers of the Euphrates and the Tigris to flow from her nostrils. And he mounds up her discarded body and he creates the land. And he imprisons all the gods that were fighting against him to become workers, to build the canals and to build up the kingdom. To slaves to build a kingdom. But then they have enough. They don't want any more. They have enough, no more. And so they go and they throw up. Now we step into the Atrahasis epic, which picks up kind of there. And these gods go on a riot. And so he comes, and to satisfy them, he takes Kingu, who is the leader of them. And there's different stories. The names change. But he takes the leader of the rebel forces, kills him, takes his blood, mixes it with the mud, and creates man. And man becomes a slave of the gods. He cares nothing for them. And as man multiplies and begins to fill the earth, he becomes very annoying. And so the gods plot their trouble, plot how to thin them out, plot how to leave them tortured, keep them impoverished, keep them barren, keep them from becoming happy and prosperous. Man's on his own. All right, so that's that. Now the Baal epic works a little bit differently. Here the world is functioning, but the world is dry. And Baal comes along, and he wants to receive the kingdom from El. And when he goes to do the kingdom from El, Yam comes to fight Baal. He wants to fight him for the kingdom. Yam is the sea. Baal conquers Yam, defeats the sea, just like Marduk did, and he does all this stuff. And he creates a new world. And in this world, his rains, because he's a storm god, his rains flow, and the earth becomes green, and everything's wonderful. But then Mot, who is death, who is desert, he comes and he fights, and he defeats Baal. And Baal dies, and he goes in the underworld. And Baal's sister, she goes and she participates in a resurrection. And when he resurrects, the earth comes back. He then has to fight Mot, and he kills Mot. And each of these battles, all of these battles, are following that pattern that we talked about earlier. Yes. So, in their vision of the world, through these creation stories, and the role that man has in them, people are hapless victims of world systems whose primary existence is chaos. And chaos comes. They're just hapless. There's nothing they can do for it. They were made to be slaves. Nobody cares about them. Matter of fact, they want them to be enough to do their job, but not so many that they become annoying. Nobody has a plan for them. Nobody loves them. Creation has no meaning, has no purpose. It is going nowhere except in circles. And the best that people can hope to do is stay alive and fed long enough to reproduce to keep the cycle going. No purpose, no meaning. Just like atheism, no meaning, no purpose. So people are born to be the slaves of selfish and petulant gods. Those power beings who operate without any care or concern for man. I open up the scriptures and I find a God who loves man, who says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And a tear comes to their eye that the creator of all wants me to be happy and healthy and prosperous. Now, that does not mean, as modern people equate it today, that he wants me to do whatever I want and for nobody to say anything to me. No, he wants you to repent of your sins, stop being selfish, and walk on the path of life. He wants you to get off the path of death and onto his path of life. And that sometimes means discipline and harsh words and hard things. But he loves you and he wants good for you. He made a good world with a purpose and a plan. And he gave you a place of honor in that purpose and plan. And the pagan opens up scripture and this is why I keep saying, reading Genesis like a pagan. What would a pagan see if you opened up the pages of Genesis? He hits this place of the good a good God, a God of love, making a good world, giving man the highest honor, making him his regent, filling him with his Holy Spirit, making him a primary player in the fulfillment of a creational purpose and plan. His life has meaning, his life has purpose, his life has honor. He's got something to put his hand to. And just imagine the tears of relief coming to their eyes that I'm not a nothing, that I'm not alone in this world. My brother is an atheist, and he made a painting once for my father. It's the curvature of the earth, and a man sitting on the curvature of the earth with his head between his knees. And the rainbow of the setting sun goes up into the heavens, which are empty and black. And my father called it praying man. And my brother went, no, he's not praying. He's not praying. He's come to a realization that he is alone in the world and he's completely on his own. That's what he sees in it. And for him, that meant there's nobody to judge me from what I do. But then he had a kid, and he loved that girl has loved that girl with every fiber of his being. And the idea that she is that person on the planet alone with no one to protect her and no one to care for her, no meaning and no purpose. If he says of his own life it has no meaning, purpose, or direction, and that nobody can hold him accountable, he was willing to embrace that. But the idea that this person who he loves like he loves breath itself, that this child has no meaning and purpose, that this child has no protection, this child has nobody looking out for him. He started having panic attacks, started feeling he was having heart attacks, the desperation that he knew he was not enough, that he would not be here forever, and that he didn't know how to teach her all the things she needed to teach her. He started sending her to study religion as an atheist. He pulled her out of public school and put her in a Christian high school because he wants her life to have meaning and purpose. I'm not even 100% sure he still is an atheist, but he's not saying it. And pray for him, everybody. Everybody pray. Everybody pray for my brother. Bring him home. All right, so people are born to be slaves of selfish and petulant gods whose knowledge is very limited. These gods are limited because they themselves are slaves to a system controlled by a meta-divine force. If there are laws, then there is a lawmaker. Atheists cannot seem to understand that today. If there is no God, then there is no right and wrong. And it is no different for me to buy milk at the store or to blow up the planet, because none of it has any meaning or purpose. They knew that if there were laws, if there were rules, if every time I dropped it, it hit the ground, there was somebody who had to make that rule and that law. But they also knew that the gods that they worshiped were petulant and selfish and stupid and susceptible to flattery and were capable of being manipulated by the world systems, so that the realm of magic was almost like discovering science. If I add this to this, I get that. If I mix these two things together, if I put these 5 ingredients together and put them under heat at 350 degrees for this amount of time, I get the best cornbread man has ever eaten. And they knew that if these things are true, and if they're true even of the gods themselves, who didn't exist but came into existence, are limited in their power, limited in their knowledge, and are acting, although more powerfully than man, within a system created by someone else, then there is that someone else. But they don't believe that they can know him, that he is sometimes conceived of a mindless, not mindless, but he's just like a force, an energy, not unlike Star Wars. Yes, not unlike Star Wars. But scholars have come to call this concept of this lawmaker the meta-divine. They don't believe you can know him. When they open up these pages, they go, I have just met the meta-divine. And they found out that the meta-divine is not an unknowable force, but he is a volitional creator who loves them and gave them a special place in the world and cares about what they do and cares about what they think. Not in the sense like, I'm so worried about how you feel, but cares about them, that they treat others right. That he does care if I go home and beat my wife. He does care if I abuse my children. He does care if I'm harsh and unfeeling. He cares about everything about me and will hold me accountable. Mm-hmm. What a different world they live in. So this meta-divine. Okay, so he's the rule maker, the lawmaker. And the gods, in their pagan mind, are dancing to the rules set by this creature that they can't know. But in Scripture, one, these are demon forces, and he can be known and is known. So the hope of man, according to them, is to use the rules established by the meta-divine to bend the power of the gods to fulfill the designs of men. I need my crops to grow. I'm going to manipulate Marduk so that his rains will make my crops grow and satisfy my needs, my purposes. Marduk's not looking out for me. Nobody's looking out for me. I got to look out for me. And so you actually, if you begin to see working in it a system that explains pagan kingdoms, pagan rules. Like if you guys got this completely in your head, perfect. It's like everything in Genesis starts to be like, I was reading this like a children's story. Now I'm reading about the fabric of the universe and the fabric of society, law and order, my purpose as a human being, what I'm called to be. And I think if people could get that in their head, if kids could get that in their head, they would be immune to critical theory. And part of critical theory is the queer theory and the critical pedagogy, which is dominating the schools. Everything, the public schools have been completely consumed under critical pedagogy and queer theory, utterly and completely. And they don't know how to resist it. They don't, because it all seems to make so much sense. I mean, why should I reject other people? I should be very inclusive. I should welcome everybody. Who am I to say that murdering your children in an abortion clinic is wrong? Who am I to tell them they have to be a parent just because they want to have sex and get pregnant? Who am I to there is no truth. It's all just how we live. And why shouldn't I celebrate what somebody else wants to be? Don't we all have the right to be what we want to be? They don't have the foundation to resist it. So the gods are not loved or trusted. They are feared and manipulated. They're power players. Now, that doesn't mean they don't speak in the language of love, but it's not real. It's all manipulation. It's imagine the rich old cranky uncle who has $20 million and 5 family members who dote on him and thank him for spitting on them because this coffee wasn't hot enough. And, oh, I'm so sorry. I deserve to be spit on, uncle. That's how they treat the gods. The gods have power that they need to use, and so they are sycophantic, and they are placating, and anything to use the rules made by the meta-divine to get control of the power players. And this is exactly what their governments look like. So I'm in India. We're traveling through the jungle. We drive from Pune to Goa through the jungle. And at one point we stop at this cliff. It's like the side of a mountain, and it is just... I've never seen an overlook in America that is compared to this overlook. And we bring a big giant bag of apples because there are monkeys. And so we pull out the bag of apples and we start ripping apples and tearing them and throwing the pieces to the monkeys. And all of a sudden, all these monkeys are running around. They all have apple pieces, and the mummies are feeding their little babies apples, and everybody's happy. And then the alpha male comes, and the alpha male is not very happy. He's furious. All these happy monkeys. Happy without him. They've received something that he didn't give them. Ah! He goes bananas. He charges the bishop, tries to get the whole bag of apples away from him, and the bishop goes ah! to scare the monkey back. But this thing, it's got teeth like this. It's got a barrel chest. It's about this big, barrel chest, teeth like this. I mean, vicious, right? And so what he decides instead, since he can't really go after the bishop because the bishop's playing that, he goes and he beats every monkey in his tribe in the head, beats him in the head, takes away all their apple slices. He puts them in a pile. Nobody dare touch his pile. And so when he takes it away from them and puts it in a pile, they're all like, that's it. Now he chases this one mother up a tree, but she's littler than he is, and so's the baby. And so they get up higher than he can get, and he can't get any higher. So he's literally just like at them because they have apple slices that he can't get back from them. So he gives up, he goes down. By this time, we've handed out all the apples. He's gathered all the apple slices, made a big pile, sits on it, and eats his fill. And after he's done eating his fill, the monkeys come to him, and he hands out apple slices to the other monkeys. But he has eaten as much as he could fit into his gut, and then hands them out. And I looked at it and I said, I'm looking at an Indian ruler. That's how authority works in India. And when you read these stories and you see this stuff, you realize that there are metaphors that are like layers. It's true on this level, it's true on this level, it's true on this level. So it's true in the monkey tribe, it's true of the local tribe, it's true of the city, it's true of the nation. This is the way Indian rulers behave. This is the way pagan rulers behave. The pagan kings act like the gods in the stories, and the pagan people relate to their leaders the way that man relates to the gods in the pagan stories. It is the corrupt, yeah, but they have power. They're just like the rich uncle has money. He's terrible. He's awful. You hope he dies tomorrow. And then are just praying that when they read the will, you're still in it. That you've been sycophantic enough that he hasn't taken you out of the will, and that you get some of that money. And that's the way they are. But everything is fear, manipulation. All the dynamics are the same. I, as the ruler, have the right to do whatever I want, and everybody else is here to serve to serve my purposes, just the way the gods treat human beings. And so you've got it on layers. And so, okay. The rulers organize themselves around the principle of continuity in the practice of sympathetic magic. So continuity is the intimate bond between spheres of existence. All right, so you have this meta-divine rule maker. They don't believe he can be known, but the gods are born, including the first chaos gods. We don't know the beginning of the chaos gods. The story begins and they're there, right? It begins with them multiplying themselves and the gods coming into existence. Something has created a reality with certain rules of existence, and the two, Apsu and Tiamat, have generated these gods in keeping with that, and they create all these beings, right? And so you have so the universe is controlled by the meta-divine. Can't know him, can't see him. The gods come into existence within that sphere of existence, and they are organized according to the rules of that existence made by the meta-divine, but they're all doing their thing within it. But now the gods exist on multiple levels. The gods are themselves, the gods are a natural force, a physical force. So you have the god, you have the physical force. So Tiamat is the sea. She's also the dragon goddess. So Tiamat is dragon goddess, Tiamat is sea. Tiamat is also the idol. And so what you do is when you open the idol, it's called opening the mouth. You actually see this in Isaiah 6, when the prophet cries out before the holiness of God, "Woe is me, I'm undone. I'm a man of unclean lips who live among a people of unclean lips." And the angel takes the tongues and brings the coal from the altar before the throne of God and touches it to the lips of the prophets and says, "Your sin is taken from you." This is like a mockery of the opening of the mouth of the idol. And he is filled with the Spirit of God, made the prophet of God, called into the commission of God, because as soon as that his sin is taken away and he is open, he hears. That's when he hears God saying, "Who will go for us?" And he's like, "I will go." And he goes, "All right, here's what you're going to do." And he goes, "How long?" "Well, this long." This is a replay of this whole system. Anyway, but in paganism, the idol, the opening of the mouth, the Spirit of God comes into the idol. But everything operates on a continuity level. So what I do on this level affects this level, affects this level. So what I do to the idol affects the god, affects the storm. Marduk is the idol. Marduk is the storm. Marduk is the god, right? So what I do to the idol affects the god, affects the storm. If I need the rains, I worship the idol, I manipulate the idol, I use we're going to talk about the type of magic, sympathetic magic. And sympathetic magic is the concept of multiple levels. We're going to talk about, okay, I'm hoping you guys get your heads around this, and it's not too confusing. Sympathetic magic means that what I do on one plane is directly connected to what happens on another plane. So while I'm worshiping the idol and offering the incense and grabbing the hem of the god or making the requests, it is affecting the god who is the storm. And so I can control the storm. If I can control the idol, I can control the god who controls the storm, so I can control the storm. And I can bring the rains that I want. It's this kind of connection. So sympathetic magic works, so you have this idea of layers or levels. So if has anyone seen Apocalypto, the movie? All right, so they have this scene where they're hunting, I forget the name of that thing, a tabor. They're hunting a tabor. And they kill the tabor, and while they're dividing up the tabor, they are going to divide the Tabor up according to the needs of the community and according to the hierarchy of the community. So you reinforce patterns, right? So one of them says, I need the eyes because my eyes have been bothering me. So that if I eat the eyes of the sacrificial animal that's been offered to the gods, if I eat the animal's eyes, I can fix my eyes. It's this sympathetic magic. If I go to worship Marduk, and I want to empower Marduk, or manipulate Marduk, or channel Marduk to creative activity, then I have to, if I want him to, if I want the land to be fertile, and the fertile rains to come, and the crops to grow, and I want fertility from these gods, then I have to empower the god through fertility action. So I go to his temple, I have sex with temple prostitutes, I am engaging fertile action in the temple around the idol, which empowers the god to be fertile, which makes the storm come. So everything's connected. That's how it, so you get a lot of ridicule in Scripture of them worshiping sticks and stones, and I am a person who's a big believer in the power of mockery. So to me, I am thrilled with it. I just finished a book on called The Queering of the American Child, and in his last chapter he says, what are we going to do about what's happening in the public school systems? And queer does not mean gay. Queering means twisting, bending something out of shape into something other than. So that's when they say the queering, they mean take it from what it is and bend it and twist it into something else. So this is queer theory. So he says, what do we do about it? And his last piece of advice is, make sure to keep a steady application of mockery. Ridicule it. Expose it for what it is. Don't be sympathetic to it. Don't be sympathetic with them. All right, so sympathetic magic means that I come and I act in conjunction with the idol in a certain way that replicates what I'm looking for from the idol in the real world. Because what happens to the idol affects the god, affects the power that the god has. If it's the sun god, I empower him to shine. If it's the Ea, the earth god, I power him to be fertile and produce the soil. All right. And so fertility rites become a very big deal for that because you're engaging in fertile activity. So when they have creation, they have an autumn festival, the Akitu festival among the Babylonians. They want to empower creation to go around again. So it's kind of like every year they're recreating the world. They want the world to be creative. They want the world to survive. They want the world to be on the path of life. And so they engage in the Akitu festival in which they reenact the creation of the world by reenacting the myth. So they act out in pageantry, paganry. You reenact the story to empower the gods. Myths are not something that once happened once upon a time. Myths didn't happen. Myths happen. They're still happening. They're enacted. So we're enacting this myth or we're enacting that myth, and you don't want to enact this myth, but you do want to enact this myth. And if you don't want to enact this myth, but do want to enact that one, then you better do this, this, and this, and that. And so part of it was the pageantry, the reenacting. So they undo. They would, according to what I've read, they would take the Babylonian king, and he would have to die for the sins of the people. And when I say the sins of the people, I don't mean going home and beating your wife. I mean the failed rituals not being what they needed to be to the gods, that the negligence and the lack of attention of the people to the gods weighs on the god, wears the god out. He's not getting all the sacrifices that he needs to be clean and strong and whole. They have a whole story. It's the story of Era, where Marduk is exhausted and tired, and his clothes are tattered, and his hair is messed up, and he needs a bath, and he needs to clean up. And so there's this idea that their sins have just weighed on him and weakened him, and so they have to cleanse the sins away, and they have to start a new creation. And so they're going to reenact the creation story, but before they reenact the creation story, they have to kill the king, who, as the representative of the people, has the power to die for the sins of the people, to carry in himself as their representative their sins and carry them away, cleanse them with his own blood as the representative of the people. But you can't kill your king every year. So they would take 2 prisoners that were sentenced to death, and they'd let them feast it up for a week. And then they'd execute one as a sacrifice for the sins of the people, because they'd crown them kings. They'd crown him king and then execute him. And so he would be like the temporary king. It's all sympathetic magic. It doesn't have to be actual. It's sympathetic. It's reenactment. So pageantry, all that kind of stuff. So the myths are stories that they are, these are not childish stories about what the pagans believed about the creation of the world. And we're not even sure of how literal they were in their own understanding of them. We know that farmers and people that couldn't read might respond to the stories in a very literal way, but we know that the priests and the kings, they understood the depth of these stories. These are very complicated worldview conceptions of engaging the created order and the powers in the world in order to keep the society flowing and functioning the way it's supposed to. This is very sophisticated stuff. And so they would enact this stuff. Right? Sounds familiar, huh? You got the two goats in the biblical one, where the one they lay their hands on the sins of the goat and they take it away into the desert, where it would probably die, by the way.
Yeah, probably.
Right. And then the other one would be offered as a sacrifice. Yeah. And so I'm not 100% sure. I'm a little fuzzy on what happens to the second criminal. I think it's something like what happened, that you release him to go away, but you exile him. Mm-hmm. I think. But those, if anybody, it would make sense, but I'm a little, for some reason at this moment, I'm a little fuzzy on that guy. But the first guy gets executed. All right. So this is how paganism works. This is how they see the world working. And so everything you do is either empowering the community in its fight against chaos or diminishing the power of the community in its fight against chaos. 5 minutes. All right, we're almost there. So sympathetic magic is the ritual manipulation of that bond, that connection, to get the gods to use their powers to fulfill the will of the worshiper. What is done to the idol affects the god, who affects the world, giving the worshiper control over his life. All right, now, so idols are kind of like voodoo dolls. Right? They're a little bit like voodoo dolls. You know, you get the little doll, and you stick a pin in it, and you cut the hair of your enemy, and you put it on the doll, and you get a little of his blood, and you put it on the doll, and then what you do to the doll affects him. You know, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Yeah. At the end, breaking the arm and burning the neck and doing and he's, he doesn't even know what's happening to him, but he's being affected by it. That's the way it is. What I do to the doll affects the god, which affects the storm that is under the power and the control of the god. So it's a little bit like a voodoo doll. The desperate sense of being out of control in a world fraught with dangers and uncertainty stands front and center in the pagan heart. Like my brother, who made that painting, who when he had a child was suddenly completely and totally overwhelmed by what he had celebrated only a couple years before. I'm on my own in a big and dangerous world. My world has no meaning, no purpose, no direction. But this child, who I love with everything I have, I can't bear the idea that she has no meaning, that she has no purpose, that she has no direction. I can't bear the idea that I am not enough to protect her. That's how they felt for themselves, their wives, their crops. They were looking for something that sated that, as one writer called it, the primal cry for order and for control and for a sense of security. And they turned to their pagan worship, to their sympathetic magic to get it. So the gods with whom chaos begins cannot be trusted to look out for the interests of humans. They're limited, selfish, petulant, and ultimately indifferent, so humans must look out for themselves. Gods are placated, sycophantly enticed, bribed, feared, not the good kind of fear, manipulated, but they are not loved and they are not trusted. What makes worship pagan is the idea that ritual words and actions turn the power of the god to fulfill the desires of the worshiper. And as far as I am concerned, I just described word faith. If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below. And don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can. And tell your friends to watch. Thank you.